Cream caramels are one of the easiest desserts to prepare, and when preparing them sous vide, you get a divine, creamy, even texture all the way through the cream caramel. Using the Control Freak and Breville Polyscience's new Hydro Circulator. I'm using steel molds for this because they have the best heat transfer when cooking in the sous vide water bath. First of all, we're going to set the Control Freak using probe control. To make the toffee, we have sugar, some water. We're just going to dissolve the sugar into the water, and we're going to set the Control Freak to 160 degrees for a nice golden toffee. We're going to change it to standard probe control here on the screen and accept that. The Control Freak is now using the external probe to measure the heat of our toffee and cooking based on the liquid temperature that we've created. This does mean that we need to use water when making our toffee. We can't do a dry toffee using this method, but it is a very accurate method for producing a very beautiful toffee. We'll make the cream caramel while we're waiting for that to get ready. We've got 60 grams of sugar and 3 whole eggs. We're just going to use a very small whisk to break the yolks and to mix the sugar and eggs together evenly. We don't want to put too much air into there because cream caramels are a custard mix, but we do need to make sure that that sugar is fully dissolved. We've preheated 150 mils of milk to blood temperature and 150 mils of cream, also heated to blood temperature. We're going to add a tiny bit of an Australian native herb, anise myrtle, which gives a slight aniseed flavour to our custard mix. And we're going to gently stir that through our mix and allow that to infuse while our toffee is coming up to colour. We'll strain our custard mix and put it into a measuring jug to make sure that our custard is clean and has no undissolved portions of egg or too larger pieces of our anise myrtle. We're going to turn that off, add a splash of brandy and allow that just to melt back down evenly. And then we'll pour our beautiful toffee into the bottom of each mould. Just enough to cover the bottom of each mould. We're going to pour our custard evenly between each of the moulds, making sure that our toffee fully covers the bottom of each mould. So that the condensation from the water doesn't get into any of our custards, we're going to cover the top of each custard with a small piece of Glad wrap. I pull it tight over the top, twist off on the sides, and wrap it around, and then take a small elastic band just to hold that in place. Each custard is prepared like this so that it can be handled individually and served individually. I've set the sous vide bath up with a rack to reduce the water depth, but still allow the circulator to be in a good amount of water. Each custard's seated on the rack, making sure that the water is higher than the level of the custard. The custards are then cooked for 40 minutes at 80 degrees Celsius. The Polyscience Hydro is the first circulator of its kind to not only have 3 separate timers, but also presets. We're using the standard cook method here. We have the option of 3 fan speeds. We're going to reduce the speed to a slower agitation speed. We're going to set our first timer 40 minutes. It sets and holds. When we want that timer to start, we just tap and the timer starts. If we wanted to set another timer, we push the plus, we add another timer for 30 minutes, set and tap. Our 30-minute timer is in blue, and if we use the arrow to go back here, our 40-minute timer is in green. When the timer comes to the end of its cycle, the screen will light up in the colour of the timer so we know which timer it was that's gone off. The new Breville Polyscience Hydro 750 circulator. We're going to prepare a plum jelly using 2 grams of agar powder, 75 grams of water, a small amount of freeze-dried Davidson plum powder, which is a native Australian ingredient to reinforce the plum flavour, and 125 grams of plum puree. The plum puree is sous vide plums, pitted, vacuum packed, and then sous vide for 15 minutes at 85 degrees, allowed to cool slightly and then pureed and passed through a sieve. We then freeze that into moulds, demould it once it's frozen solid, and vacuum pack it into 250 gram portions to use throughout the winter. We're going to again use the Control Freak for its accurate temperature control. Agar powder needs to come to 90 degrees Celsius to fully incorporate. Because we don't want to overheat our plum or our Davidson plum powder, we're going to dissolve the agar in the water. We're just going to rain the agar powder into the top of the water while that heats up, and it'll only take a very short time on a powerful unit like the Control Freak for this water to be heated up to 90 degrees Celsius, activating the agar powder in the water. Once the agar powder is fully activated, we'll add a small amount of the Davidson plum powder to the mix and all of the frozen plum puree. Agar creates a beautiful brittle jelly and makes elegant cubes as a garnish. This mix could also be pureed up once it's been set as a jelly to form a plum fluid gel. We'll just allow that mix to fully dissolve before we pour it without it ever coming back to the boil. The advantage of the Control Freak is you can lower your temperature when you add fruit purees or are making custards or tempering chocolate, so that you have ultimate control over the product it is that you're working with. The Control Freak always still displays the actual temperature of the cookware, so we know if we're cooling things down. We can either measure the temperature of the pot, waiting until it's an appropriate time to pour, or we could use probe control to measure the actual liquid temperature and watch as it comes down before we pour at the exact right moment. Our plum puree has now dissolved, and we've allowed the mix to slowly start to temper down. Using our spatula, careful not to form bubbles into the mix, we're going to pour 2 even layers of jelly into our Pyrex and allow that to set first at room temperature for 10 minutes and then 20 minutes in the fridge, and that should be completely set. Let's plate our creme caramel with blood plum jelly. We've got toasted pine nuts and shiso. So we've added an anise flavour to the creme caramel. We've got that slight tartness of the blood plums, the sweet earthiness of the pine nuts, and an earthy tartness to the red shiso. We're just going to gently ease this jelly from the glass mould. Just like that. You can see the beautiful set on that jelly. We're going to cut just 2 thin strips per serve. I'm going to twist that jelly to plate there. And then also with this one, twisting that in to get that set. We're then going to garnish with a few of our pine nuts there. We're going to gently demould our creme caramel. You can see that that's got a nice firm set to it, and allow that to drop out with the sauce. And we're just going to finish the dish with 3 tiny sprigs of shiso that we grow here as pot plants at the culinary school. Anise creme caramel with blood plum jelly, toasted pine nuts and red shiso.